Welcome. We present the InSights Roadshow, episode 4. This one is focusing on agriculture. We at Educe Analytics are a Sydney-based research consulting and corporate access company. We are active in the India-Australia corridor. We present Jinesh Shah, managing partner at Omnivore. There are several agri-tech startups in India which are helping bring new technology and efficiency, and also helping in increasing the productivity of agriculture. Many of these startups are funded by Omnivore, a venture capital fund building the future of agriculture and food systems. Jinesh co-founded Omnivore with Mark Kahn in 2010. He's also a member of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, focusing on agriculture and food processing. He's in the committee. He's also in the co-working group at the World Economic Forum related to agriculture, and the chairperson of Impact Investors Council's Executive Council. We welcome Jinesh on the roadshow today. Jinesh, can you please introduce yourself and Omnivore?
Sure, thanks, Jitendra. Thank you for having me here. Right. About my background. I happened to get into agriculture sector by accident. Right. I used to work for various corporate finance teams of Indian IT companies doing acquisition mergers, doing some IPOs for some of the companies, and over a period of time happened to join the VC industry. Right. It was not destined to join, but just things worked out well, and I joined Nexus as a CFO and a vice president there. Spent some three and a half years. Realized that Indian venture industry is just beginning to start growing in the Indian context, and was starting to look at various subsectors within India to explore. Right, and I happened to stumble into agriculture and rural India. I was speaking with Mark, who is now my co-founder, about their vision, about how he was working for Godrej Agrovet, right, and was trying to understand what is the Godrej's vision about Indian agriculture and Indian rural sector. Found it interesting, and it just took a lot of conversations, and Mark and I started Omnivore. It's now a 12-year journey for both of us, with a clear intention that we want to try to solve few large problems in Indian agriculture sector. Right, a sector which is contributing nearly 25% of India's GDP, nearly 50% of India's workforce, but has no or little investments coming in this sector. Right, we found this is an interesting opportunity and decided to explore ways in 2010, 12, 11. Started with the first fund, a small token fund with Godrej as an anchor investor for us, and then over a period of time raised another fund. All doing deployments in the Indian markets with a clear aim, saying that we should try to help the Indian farmer, that is the smallholder farmers in India, and hopefully take those solutions globally in countries where there are a lot of smallholder farmers. So that's probably about me.
Thank you, Jinesh. Thank you for the introduction. Now, a lot of people in the world and in Australia think about venture capital. In Australia, it is there. It's a very different focus there. Can you give us some idea about the agri-focused VC industry in India as a whole, and how is it going?
Sure. Thanks. So, when we started out in 2010, right, maybe there were 50 agriculture startups, right? Not all all network startups. Some focused on products, some focused on farm mechanization. It was not a norm, it was an exception, right? And we were the only VC trying to do agri-tech deals in 2011-12. It was a very painful journey, right? There was no one in the industry doing that investment. Fast forward 10 years, today there are at least 2,000 or 3,000 agri-tech startups in India. Indian venture ecosystem, Indian startup ecosystem has all grown, right? And so has agri-tech startup ecosystem has grown. At least 2,000 to 3,000 agri-tech startups, of which at least 500 startups can be funded over the next 5 years. So that's working. And Indian agri-tech startups initially were focused on making machines or making products for the farmers, but now they are coming out with digital first solutions, working on network. Now also some of them are also working on the new problems which Indian agri might face, right? I mean, issues about climate change, issues about dwindling productivity, working on new agri life sciences kind of innovation. So that is coming out. Also, the entrepreneurs which were initially far and few, only Mavericks used to join the agri VC as agri startups, but now we are seeing young entrepreneurs who have been part of successful startups themselves coming out of those, and those startups might not be agriculture startups, but they're coming out and trying to create a disruptive solutions in the Indian agri startups scenario. So everything seems to change in the last year. Things have changed, and I think in the next few years the change is only going to further increase from here.
So very interesting. I think Omnivore was one of the pallbearers of this industry when it started in India, which is great to know. Now you mentioned
we were the fifth fund globally, right? It's not even that we were globally. It's agri was very small in 2010 across the world.
And look at the focus on agri right now, given the prices and the production. You did mention that you and Mark were working in the industry, and then you were looking at doing something for agriculture. That's a broad idea. What was the exact trigger for you to say, hey, we have to start this now, and we have to set up Omnivore?
Look, I mean, there are two different triggers, one different from Mark and different from me, right? So from my perspective, I was working with Nexus and was helping the fund as a CFO, right? Do diligence for companies, looking to be part of board of few companies. So working as a CFO's role, realized that the Nexus did a couple of agri-tech startups those days, realized it seems to be interesting. And I genuinely believe that if India had to achieve its potential, only the urban startups or the urban technology companies cannot be the solution provider, right? The rural India had to be part of that. So that was a trigger point, and I realized that we should look at agri-tech startups. But I was not part of the investment team. I was a CFO there, and so obviously I had a very limited option to influence at Nexus, right? And Mark had this vision. Mark was part of Godrej. Right? He used to head M&A and strategic initiatives at Godrej Agrovet. He started getting a lot of startups coming to them and say, will you make investments from your balance sheet? And Mark was unable to do those things from the balance sheet because the size matters, right? So all in all, we thought that agri is going to become interesting. He was looking at how does the existing his employer Godrej innovate to next level. And I was looking from my perspective saying, can I be an entrepreneur, do something on my own? Because I always wanted to be an investment professional. And as a Nexus, I was the CFO, right? So it just was a trigger point saying I wanted to be something on my own. And then it just happened out, right? It was not too much of planned saying that I will do agri-tech startup. I want to do something in the rural India. And because Mark is my partner, and he knew more about agriculture than rural, so we decided to look in the agri-tech space. I mean,
you make it sound easy. I'm sure it is not. When you set it up, because when I talk to a lot of VCs, Ps, and also entrepreneurs, it's the first hurdles which are the most difficult to cross. So when you set it up, yes, you had the support that people were coming to you for funding. What was the initial big things that you had to face, and how did you overcome them?
I mean, the biggest challenge was to raise the fund, right? I mean, 2010, agri-tech, venture, India. I mean, everything which was wrong was on my side, right? There was nothing going on. I mean, fortunately, we had the support of Godrej's, and that was the helping. It started out the process of raising capital, right? The second big challenge was in 2010, India was not really digital, right? Indian farmers were not digital. We had 2Gs and 3Gs connected in the urban India, but in rural India, it was absent. And so a lot of startups were focused on creating a product solutions, saying, can I create a product and sell to a specific company or do something on that scale, right? That was a big challenge, right? Because there was no network effect. I can't reach out to farmers. I can't reach out to dealers. And it took a lot of effort for doing the same, right? Third, I mean, India had zero risk capital in the agri-tech agri-tech ecosystem. So where do I get good entrepreneurs from, right? So we were like hunters, right? Saying, let's travel in the trains in India. I had my first employee who is now a partner, Shubhadev Sanyal. He traveled probably length and breadth of India on railways because we couldn't afford flights at those days, right? So, and we were finding out deals. Okay, this seems to be a good entrepreneur. Let's talk to him. And we had to explain what is VC, what was startup, and that was it, right? So getting entrepreneurs, investors, and the ecosystem, I think nothing was there. I think while a lot of people say it's a first mover advantage, but first mover also has a lot of pains, right? I mean, you are starting with a clean slate. So, but there was zero support, right? I mean, and that's how it was like. So,
I get your point. When you are a first mover, the biggest hurdle, as you said, to get the partners, but I think the bigger one is to educate the market about what is it. We are doing it at Educe, and we are also educating our clients about what big potential India has. As you said, 20 years ago, people thought about nothing. It's not a big industry. It's a low productivity industry. India is, every country in the world is having lesser and lesser focus on agriculture. But I think the productivity and efficiency is where I think you guys are making a big mark, which is great. Jinesh, also, I see on your website you have a slew of companies that you have invested in, your portfolio companies. Can you give us a brief overview of what kind of companies that you have invested in? And going forward, how is that going to change your growth?
Look, I mean, we invested in the first one, product companies. We invested into IoT companies. I mean, one of the early bets which really worked well is a company called Stellabs, right? It's a dairy IoT company. Stellabs is working with nearly 2.5 million farmers, helping the farmers collect the milk via the milk collection centers, and then now has reached to a stage that now becoming a complete milk solution provider company, right? So not only providing tech solution, but now if a company wants to launch a milk brand or wants millions of liters of milk per day, I mean, Stellabs is able to collect from their farmers and give the supply to the milk to the companies whoever need it across whichever part of the country is, right? And the interesting is that part is that India's milk supply chain is very complicated. You have 70 to 90 million farmers who supply few liters of milk every morning and every evening, and by end of the day, it becomes the world's largest producer of milk. I mean, and that is not, and Indian farmers are owning 2 cows or 3 cows on best, right? That is how the average cattle owner in India is about. And Stellabs is able to create a multi-million dollars business based on the smaller farmers, and is working with large corporates on the other side to supply them lakhs and lakhs of millions of liters of milk every day. And that works out. It's a very fascinating story to see how it is growing. Another company, what we find interesting is a company called Arya. I mean, India is a land of lots of small farmers. We have issues about food storage. A lot of horrible stories come out saying that India's food is getting wasted. But I mean, how do you do about it, right? I mean, we have lots of warehouses available, but the farmers don't know where to store them because these are not discoverable, and the warehouse owners don't know where to get the farmers who can store in them. So Arya is working on the same, trying to bring the discovery platform, becoming India's largest private warehousing company, is having a billion dollars of goods lying in the godowns. I mean, they are funding those farmers, few farmers with couple of tons of produce, and they are financing them and helping them do the market linkages across the world right now, right? I mean, because India's food is now getting exported globally, right? So, and it started out from scratch. Bunch of three ICICI bankers who they spent 15 years working in commodities markets in the ICICI Bank and decided to do private warehousing financing in India, and is now the largest private warehousing company in the country. I mean, after the government. So, I mean, another company is Dehat, right? They started in state of Bihar, which is one of the least developed state in the country, right? And they've now been able to work with now nearly 3/4 million farmers on their own. They are one of the largest distributor of farm inputs, the largest collector of farm produce. I mean, helping the farmers to get digital capital. Everything is working out, right? And what we could see, this is like they're present in 7,000 locations in India. and each location caters to say 100 to 200 farmers, and you're creating an employment in the rural India which was not existent, right? So this is all creating scale, at the same time having a great positive impact on lots of small farmers. I mean, this is something which is very interesting. I mean, I could go on for on and on, but I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
stopping at
it
two
sounds very
examples.
interesting. I think it's like institutionalization of farming. What cooperatives used to do earlier, now the private sector is coming in and doing the same, which is great to hear. Um, and where do you plan to go, Jinesh? As in, what about like new funds, raising new capital? What about exits? Is that an opportunity that you are exploring right now?
Look, I think we already have a couple of exits in our first fund. We got some partial exits in the fund too, and the agri-tech ecosystem is now is doing well, right? We also seeing a lot of traction from general VCs and private equity funds wanting to take some bets in this sector. We're also seeing a lot of global capital coming into the agri sector in India, right? Because Indian agri sector is now having a lot of tailwinds right now. So a lot of investors, global capital is also wanting to come to India. Uh, but from our perspective, we think Indian agriculture also faces a lot of challenges, right? You have issues of climate, right? India could be one of the Indian farmers could be one of the big casualties of climate change, right? I mean, we need to adapt the farming technologies or how farming is done, right? India is having issues of soil losing fertility. I mean, because of whatever the way we have been doing farming, right? So how do we bring the fertility back, right? We have issues of water table dropping around it. I mean, we're not sure whether Indian farmers are ready with the new kind of seeds, because we might have more and more heat right now, right? I mean, because of this, with the rising temperatures. I mean, monsoons could be erratic. I mean, you could have a short burst of intense monsoon, but a long dry period. At the same time, I mean, because of the changing climate, right, increasing heat, finding labor to do a job in the field at 45 to 50 degrees temperature in summers is not, it's not possible, right? So we might see a lot of robots coming into Indian agriculture sector. So a lot of robotics will come, a lot of agri life science is going to come, and I think that is what we are seeing, a change around it. A lot of things will get evolved around climate. So a lot of adaptability, resilience, some new innovations, that's what's going to happen, and that's what we will focus in the future. I mean,
I think it seems like in agriculture, the climate issue is a generic issue across the world. And I just want to highlight the point I was talking to you earlier, and we discussed this, is that India is no longer like the Hungary bowl of the world where we only import farming stuff. In the last few years, we have become big exporters of agri-produce. And I think last year was the biggest agri-produce agriculture produce export year for India. So I think we are no longer just the importer, we are exporting now, and that's something the world has to notice. Jinesh, one more thing is about, because I'm talking from Australia, you're in India. Australia has a good ecosystem in terms of agri investing and agri-tech. How do you think an Australian investor, an Australian company, or an Australian agricultural trader, or big farmer, how can they partner or participate in this amazing growth in the Indian agriculture?
I think we would love to see more and more Australian investors, farmers coming into Indian agri sector, right? I think there are quite a few areas where a lot of collaboration can come, right? Indian farmers are evolving, right? I mean, while we have sounded that a lot of tech is coming to it, but look, we have 130 million farmers. Sometimes the practices of farming are very ancient, right? So if there are some technology service providers, some IoT solutions providers, or some insurance companies wanting to get into this sector, it is easy, and it is possible for people to collaborate. I think investors, I think Indian agri needs lots and lots of capital, creating agri infrastructure, whether it's cold storage or connected warehouses or digital payments, or helping the farmers to do proper market linkages. At the same time, focusing on meat exports, focusing on cattle breeds. I mean, that areas, the knowledge what Australia has, it can be used by the Indian stakeholders. At the same time, look, I think there are few pitfalls, right? Because Sometimes what you're seeing that people from outside come in and say, this is what the solution has worked in that country. They will try to superimpose on the Indian farmers. And that is why it just falls apart, right? I mean, when you talk to an Australian trader, he talks of having grains in silos, right? And Indian farmers talks in having grains in units of 50 kg bags.
Yeah.
Because he's owning 2 or 3 acres of land, and Australian farmer is owning maybe 5,000, 10,000 hectares of land. And that is where it needs to be really acclimatized to the Indian requirement, right? So if the learnings from the developments in Australia can be imbibed to the requirements of the Indian farmers, right? I cannot have the Indian farmers change the way of farming overnight. We will not have increased. We have small lands on an average, and while we are trying to work across to bring more and more farmers under FPOs and organized cooperatives, it's not going to happen overnight. So the solution has to be customized from the Indian perspective, right? So if that is done, I think sky's limit, right? Investments, innovations, collaborations, you take anything, India would be willing to take that, right? So, but you will have to customize for the Indian customers' requirement.
It's a very good point that you made. I think we had one question from our partners is about, they understand the farm sizes in India are very small, so the produce sizes are very small on a per client basis or per farmer basis. If we want to invest or if we want to partner, how do we scale up? So even if you want to start small, what is the best way to scale up our business?
I think best way is to figure out a way how can you increase the efficiency, right? If you have, let's say, small farmers, but on an average, there will be 2,000 farmers in a small village, right? Can you bring efficiencies to aggregate those demand or supply using the best efficient means of logistics, right? And can some of that benefit be passed on to farmers? Can we work of bringing the processing units within the locations where farms are produced? Look, everyone in the world talks about bringing the large quantum of agri-produce to a processing unit, which can process lots of capacity, but everything is centralized, right? In India, it is going to be decentralized. You cannot have the factories in the large cities and the production happening in the small villages. The factories will also have to become smaller, decentralized, will have to process at the village, right? So it has to be decentralized. So if you guys can start thinking on decentralization, you'll find those answers. I mean, if we don't want to change it, then I think it's going to be a difficult market.
And Jinesh, you mentioned some terms which may not be relevant understanding of people here. You mentioned FPOs.
Okay, so FPOs is
and you mentioned other entities who can aggregate, who can act as an aggregator or help them to scale. Can you just throw some light on that?
So FPOs are a group, is an organized cooperative movement supported by Government of India, where 100 to 200 to 300 farmers would come together from a company, so that demand can be aggregated, supply can be aggregated, you can get insurance on a better terms. I mean, you're trying to increase the unit of farmers from one individual farmer to 200 to 300 to 500 farmers, right? So a company which wants to work with an FPOs can work with farmers owning 2,000 to 3,000 acres of land on a collective basis. So that's what FPO does. It's called Farmer Producer.
Right now. So of course, you won't be dealing with one person, but you can deal with an FPO. And either supply to them, buy for them, provide services to them, provide technology to them, provide robotics to them. So it is possible.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Another question which came, Jinesh, is you actually mentioned this, but people are just wondering, in your space, which specific area is getting new attention? Is it some references are like, is it technology? You covered that. Analytics. What about financing? You covered insurance. What about engineering, which you said you covered, because that's what's the first where we started. And what about irrigation? So out of these 3 or 5 specific areas, where do you think there is more focus? Technology, analytics, financing, engineering?
I think Jitendra, the focus is all across, right? The biggest challenge is that we don't have a proper infra in place, right? So putting the infra in place, making for smaller farmers. Second thing is market linkages, right? I mean, it's not that Indian farmers can't produce enough, right? They don't produce enough because they don't get paid for the amount of effort what they put in, right? So because they are tiny farmers, if they negotiate with a trader or a localized intermediary or to a large company, I mean, everyone tries to squeeze them out. So if you can get a better market linkage, it's always useful. And financing is the key for Indian agriculture sector, right? It is not that there is no credit in Indian agriculture sector. The problem is the credit comes at 40% interest, right? So farmer, any business which has to pay 40% interest, he cannot survive. So if the entire financing can be done at an organized level, work with a lot of agri-tech startups, bring a lot of unorganized capital to convert to an organized capital, the cost of financing for Indian farmers would become very manageable, and that would make farmers more efficient and hopefully will also incentivize to make a more and more production habit. So financing is going to be key for everything in Indian agri startups, in Indian agriculture sector, sorry.
That's good to know. I think financing comes with, again, the credit history and the credit and inputs that you need to get. I think I've spoken to some firms who are working on getting that credit input and the credit data.
I think that is now getting resolved, right? I mean, 5 years ago, Indian farmers didn't have any bank accounts. Today, they are getting bank accounts. Their transaction history is coming into banks. So payments and cash flows are coming via the bank. So it's getting better by the day. It's not as bad as what people make it sound. I mean, with the advent of neobanks, I think it's easier to move things, right? I mean, that seems to be the case. And hopefully in 10 years, I think the Indian financing sector problem should get resolved. I mean, that's what my sense is.
Just to highlight that in India, people do not know is that the digital payment and the digital finance has gone to like grassroots levels now. So all of the data is available on the tip of hands and people can analyze it and form their own credit.
I mean, not to boast, but India's financial stack is probably the world's best right now, right? If someone has to make a 2-cent payment, you don't need to give cash. You can just use your scanner on a mobile phone and you can make the payments. I mean, which doesn't happen even in the Western world, I mean.
It's a first in India, right? So that's good to know. And Jinesh, you also mentioned about, yes, you can partner, you have to build relationships, long-term connection with the farmers, FPOs, and players. But how you mentioned the FPOs now for an entity here to either invest in India or sell their products to India or just source. What would you suggest them to? Where do they start? Do they start with the trade commissions, the big companies, or they reach out to the ag-tech startups and try to find their way through?
Look, I think reaching out to trade commission makes sense for sure to start with, but working with Indian startups is also important because let's say if someone wants to reach out to 500,000 farmers, I mean, Dehat can do that job because they're already working with around those numbers of farmers, right? If you want to get into dairy sector, want to collect milk from the Indian farmers, want to create products in dairy sector, working with a company like Stellabs makes a logical sense because they're working with 2.5 million farmers, right? I mean, they're doing the job of bringing those farmers together, right? So, and those companies are also now fairly reached to some scale, right? Also, if you're talking to warehousing companies, you want to have capacity to store produce in India if you want to buy, right? I mean, Arya can really help you out. So, while trade commissions are always there, that's a traditional ways of going in. I mean, if you're looking for speed, if you're looking to execute in a seamless manner, I think going to a large successful startup in agri space is also a good area. Besides, the large corporates in India are also now fairly large. So if you are able to get relationship with them, I think they also can play. I mean, India is in a unique situation. We have millions and millions of small farmers, but we have created very large agri businesses. So it's there. So if any Australian investor wants to come into it, I think we would be in a position to help wherever we can have it.
And just to point to that, when Indian farming has any issues or changes, the whole world reacts. We have seen this in the last 1 month about what's happening with wheat and what's happening with other produce. So you're right. The farming may be small on its own, but collectively it's a big force. And I really like the idea about directly going to corporates, either established corporates or startups who have that network, and directly building those relationships easier, faster, and helps them to reach a broader community in India and into farming. So With that, we come to the end of our speculative time. Jinesh, thanks a lot for giving this very interesting overview of the VC ecosystem and also the farming system. You leave us with some things to still delve upon, like the financing part of farming and also the connectivity to rural India. So I think hopefully we will speak again and delve on those issues. Thank you for joining InSights and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, bye, Jitendra. Thanks. Take care. Bye.